This is Monday, August 1st, 2022, and it's 5:30 p.m. This is the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee, and if you would, call the order. Roll call.
Oh. Chair Hanneman,
Here.
Vice Chair Cardinal,
Here.
Member Brago,
Here.
Member Fant, Member Castens, Member Lopez, Member Schutte.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you. The first order of business is the public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to and within the authority of the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Is there any public comment? Seeing no public, I guess there is no public comment, so we will go on to number 3, and that is for possible action, approval of the minutes. The last time we met was February 7th, 2022. And before we go for the approval of minutes, may I just congratulate you on, this must have taken you hours to do this, these minutes. Did it? Yeah, not that bad, okay.
No,
It was just amazing. It's, you did a good job. Thank you. So,
Thank you.
I will, are there any comments?
Madam Chair, if I can just ask the DA's office, we have 4 members present today, 2 of which were not at this meeting on February 7th.
Oh,
Okay. And I guess my question for the members that were not present are, what's your preference on voting? Simply because you are absent doesn't necessarily mean that you must abstain. If you are comfortable voting to approve the minutes, then you can still do that. If you had, one of the things you could do is if you had the opportunity to view the video of the meeting from last time, you can make your own judgment as to whether or not the minutes reflect the meeting. If you're not comfortable voting and there's only 2 members present to vote, then of course a 2 in favor and 2 abstain vote would not pass because there's not a majority of the members present voting in favor of it. In that case, the approval of the minutes could be postponed until next meeting when more members are present and/or when more members have had the opportunity to review the prior meeting.
okay. Did everybody read their minutes? Do you understand them? Would you like to vote on them?
I read the minutes, but I did not view the video of the meeting, but I don't have any issue with the minutes, so.
And what about you?
reviewed them with you, so I mean, that's.
Okay, I think they were pretty self-explanatory.
I didn't have
Probably
any
the
questions.
easiest. Okay, so no questions. So I guess we go back to the beginning, is for possible action, approval of the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes for Monday, February 7th, 2022.
Second? Any second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we have approved the minutes, so that will not be forthgoing. So thank you very much. Okay, the next that we are on is number 4, which is for possible action, discussion, and possible action relating to code enforcement activities in the Carson City redevelopment area. Hope, will you take us through this, please?
Yes. So the redevelopment budget pays for half of a compliance officer, so 0.5 FTE. So from time to time, code enforcement will pursue proactive code enforcement activities in the redevelopment area. In May, I had the compliance officer go into both redevelopment areas to identify where there were weeds and pursue enforcement activities there. He has updated his numbers and continued working on this project since the report was completed. So the numbers in both redevelopment areas were 35 properties were found to be out of compliance. 29 of those properties have come into compliance. 2 property owners have been communicating with the compliance officer, and he's working with them. 4 citations have been issued. So I want to give this report because part of the budget for redevelopment does include code enforcement. And I also want to put this on the agenda to identify what other enforcement activities the committee would suggest be pursued at a proactive level in the redevelopment area. Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments on Hope's report? Well, Hope, I think your numbers sound really darn good, 35 to 29 to 2 to 4 citations. And I know that this is one thing that has bothered me personally going down Carson Street because I do that twice a day. And with all the monies that we have spent in the downtown redevelopment zone and seeing all the weeds is just not acceptable. So congratulations to you and thank you to your compliance officer for doing such a good job. So I hope that the 4 citations will also come around. So, okay, as far as, is there anything else that the compliance officer should be doing in the downtown area? Does anybody have any suggestions? The one that I think is important is the temporary signing, because we've discussed that ad nauseum over the years, where you will see a plastic sign or a fabric sign on a building for months, and it says opening next month, and it's now 6 months later. So I think, and as I recall, there are regulations stating that they can only be up a certain amount of time.
It's 30 days, I believe.
30 days?
We can certainly add that. I actually had a different compliance officer proactively, and this part was throughout the entire city, doing enforcement on those flag signs where they put them up and it's like a flag. So if you don't see flag signs, that's why. If you do see them, let us know. So I think he's done a good job with the flag signs, and I can transition him over to the temporary signs in the redevelopment area.
There was one temporary sign that I had reported, and it was down within a week or 2 afterwards. So, because they had been open for 6 or 8 months, and the temporary now coming soon was still there. So it's good to see. But the downtown looks a whole lot better. Thank you.
And just so the committee knows, in talking to the compliance officers, and this is a good thing, their instinct is to work cooperatively with everybody. But sometimes when you work cooperatively with everybody, an outsider like me comes in and says, why is it taking so long? And the compliance officer says, well, this person's from out of town, and it's really hard to get help and to get landscapers and this and that. I said, look, the city just spent millions on our property. That's not acceptable. If you're a property owner, you have a responsibility to maintain your property, and you have to take care of the weeds. I don't think that's asking a lot. So we are taking it seriously, and we recognize that the redevelopment money has been spent to improve these areas.
The one question that I do have, though, is the redevelopment area extends into almost all of the downtown historic district. And some of those properties are just horrible. And that's like our number one reason, I can tell you myself from working with visitors all day, one of the first things they ask for is the Kit Carson Trail brochure. And is there anything going to be done on that? Because they already get quite a tax rebate to keep their properties looking good.
Back in May, when I assigned this task, I assigned it for both redevelopment areas and the historic district. The Historic Resource Commission has made similar observations to yours and has requested that we improve enforcement activities in the historic district, primarily based on the landscaping issues. So he did that starting in May as well. You're not seeing those numbers.
Well, good. Any further comments on this issue?
I just want to second that. Yeah, and dead trees, dead shrubs, in addition to weeds. So thank you for reaching out to the historical side of things as well.
We always say how beautiful our historic district is, and then you get there and you go, whoa, okay. All right, so any other comments? No? Hearing none? All right, then I believe that this report stands as it is. Thank you so much. Okay, so going on to 4B for possible action, discussion regarding redevelopment discretionary funds budget allocations for fiscal year 2023 and priorities and objectives. I feel hope that we've discussed this many a time, so here we go again. Go ahead.
I will keep it brief. I just wanted to come back and tell the committee what happened since your February 7th meeting. So you all read your minutes, as we just talked about. So at the meeting on February 7th, the committee made a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority regarding discretionary funds. On February 25th, the Board of Supervisors held a retreat. During that retreat, one of the items the board discussed was what are the redevelopment priorities. So as you may recall, on February 7th, I carried over language that had been in past reports concerning the priorities, but I didn't know 100% that was still the priority. So we went to the Board of Supervisors and said, is this still your priority? And if not, what is the priority? The Board of Supervisors on February 25th did verify that redevelopment funds should be used for infrastructure projects that benefit the general public and provide support to existing property owners, businesses, and events, rather than providing incentives directly to individual property owners, businesses, and events. So that when you looked at this February 7th, that was our understanding that was the priority, and the board verified that's the priority. On April 21st, 2022, the Redevelopment Authority approved the 2023 tentative budget, and there's just a handful of items I want to spotlight for you. First, the arts and culture events. In anticipation of the city having more participation in arts and culture events, the funding was increased from $25,000 in FY22 to $50,000 in FY23. So RACC didn't recommend $50,000. Your recommendation stayed with the $25,000. We didn't even talk about changing that. But the board, in anticipation of more involvement, and that includes a staff person in our Parks and Rec department to address arts and culture, suggested increasing that line item to $50,000. And so that's what the FY23 budget is. The farmers market. The Board of Supervisors discussed the farmers market becoming self-sufficient, meaning that the city's annual contribution would decrease each year. In fiscal year 23, the funding is $25,000, which is what the RACC recommended, but the expectation is this funding will be reduced annually. On the facade grants, the Board of Supervisors discussed the conflict between the facade grant program and the funding priorities. So we just talked about the funding priorities, and the redevelopment funds aren't supposed to improve an individual property. They're supposed to be for events and infrastructure that will create a benefit to a broader group. And so it was discussed that, well, wait, the facade grant's not accomplishing what we just identified as our priority. So recognizing this, the Redevelopment Authority advised staff that any facade grant money left over at the end of a fiscal year should be rolled over to sidewalk work. So whereas in the past it maybe would have been rolled over for more money for the facade grant, going forward it will not, and it will be rolled forward for sidewalks. The FY23 budget does allocate $50,000 for facade grants, and we'll be talking a little more about facade grants on our next item. The fireworks. You'll remember that when the committee was looking at the budget, the director of RSVP spoke and asked for $15,000 versus the $7,500 that had been budgeted in past years. The RACC supported $15,000, and the Redevelopment Authority also supported $15,000 for that event. So the FY23 budget will include $15,000 for the fireworks. In terms of the capital improvements, I won't go through those. They're in the minutes and they're in the staff report. The Redevelopment Authority agreed with RACC's recommendations for the FY23 capital improvements. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I just figured I'd let you know what happened after you made your recommendation.
Does anybody have any comments on this at all? On this portion of it? No?
No,
Yeah, go ahead.
no. it's-
No? Court? Okay. The only question that I have is the facade grants. I understand, why it's going down, and we really haven't funded it more than 50,000 for the past several years, and it really has never rolled over. So we put that to other things. The July 4th fireworks, as I recall, the 15,000 was because of the fact that they had not had fireworks a year before, so they were using that. So is this, and it's not clear, is this going to be 15,000 annually after starting this year, or is it?
The board only committed to fiscal year '23 and allocated $15,000 to fiscal year '23.
Okay, so that's double what it has been in the past, okay. And what's the other, the arts and culture, so that's 50,000 primarily because of a new staff person, is that right? Not because it's going to be funding any kinds of new events?
At the retreat, my understanding was the increased funding was due to the new staff person. What I understand is the Arts and Culture Commission, in looking at the fiscal '23 request, funded in excess of the 25,000. And I believe the Redevelopment Authority agreed with that funding. So although it got increased to 50, because the city would have more involvement as opposed to just the Visitors Bureau and the commission, my understanding is that money is being put into activities and not staffing.
Okay, so I'm not sure where the redevelopment, this RACC sits on all of this. What is it that you're asking?
I'm just informing you of what happened after you took your action of February 7th. So on February 7th, you made a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority. The Redevelopment Authority and the Board of Supervisors have voted on the redevelopment budget, and I'm letting you know, sort of spotlighting some things where they had discussions and where they maybe changed the recommendation of RACC, just so you know. You don't have to take any action on this.
Okay, thank you, because some of this is like, it's going back and forth. I mean, we've been discussing a lot of this for so many years. It's just like, okay,
No, you don't have to talk about it. It's just to let you know.
all right.
So
Bernie,
you-
I got one thing. So this is Vice Chair Cardinal. A quick question on the last sentence with regards to the farmer's market, where Redevelopment Authority funded the farmer's market for $25,000 in fiscal year 2023. However, the expectation is that the funding will be reduced annually. Is there any kind of a table that's associated with that, like we did as RACC with regards to all the special events in the past, so we can see that reduction?
Actually, I believe I gave the board, my recollection is I gave the board a 5-year projection, but the board did not vote on that, and the Redevelopment Authority did not vote. So that actually may be something that we can bring to a future RACC meeting for your recommendation on how steep or not steep that reduction is.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, and I think if we followed the same precedent that we had in the past with regards to our special events where we get them, we've been funding them and then we get them on their own, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I agree, because that was, at that time, it was Supervisor Bagwell, and she was very adamant about not funding any new events or any events, and instead putting the monies towards the Arts and Culture Commission for them to do it. So that's why I'm surprised that this is even here, because it was sort of a issue that was gone. So do you want to go through the rest of it, or everybody's okay with this? You're fine? Okay. The other question that I have is the Stewart Streetscape and sidewalk improvements. Will we be getting something on that as to where this is going to be in the timetable?
This is a budget for FY '23, which FY '23 started in July 1st. So when there's a request for funding, that will come before RACC to
So-
approve the expenditure.
Okay, so all this is just information only and nothing.
Exactly. I just wanted to let you know, and in the case of the capital improvements, essentially, the redevelopment authority agreed with all of your recommendations. So you don't have to do anything with this. This is just to let you know what budget we're working with in fiscal year '23.
Sorry, does anybody have any comments on that portion of it at all? Okay, so we're now moving right along to 4C. And again, this is hope, this is discussion and action regarding redevelopment discretionary fund balances from fiscal year 2022 budget. Hope.
Okay, so we just looked at what was budgeted for fiscal year '23. So at the risk of stating the obvious, the city uses a fiscal year budget versus a calendar year budget. The budget year is July 1st to June 30th. So we just finished our fiscal year '22 budget. So in looking at the fiscal year '22 budget at year end, I looked and to see, well, what money actually got spent that we thought would be spent because it was budgeted, and what money didn't, get spent. That's what I'm more interested in. What did not get spent, and why wasn't it spent? Because obviously, we have this redevelopment money. We want good things happening in the redevelopment area, and we have budgets to make that happen. So if the money doesn't get spent, that is a lost opportunity. Should we not have allocated that money there and put it somewhere else? Or are there good reasons why it didn't happen? So I will mention that Deborah Soul from the Visitors Bureau and Randy Rice, our city engineer, are here. And when we get to their items, I'll mention it. But what I'm going to do is just briefly go through some of the items that had a pretty significant fund balance at the end of the fiscal year, just so you're aware of where money was not spent, that where it had been budgeted. And again, there's not a need for a lot of action on this. This is mostly me informing you so that you understand how the money is or is not being used. So if we start with the facade improvement program, that was budgeted at $50,000. We have an end-of-year balance in excess of $43,000. I think to a certain extent, the community doesn't know about the facade grant. And so what I'll do is I'll do a press release. We'll try to get the word out about the facade grant so that people who are doing improvements in the redevelopment areas can avail themselves to that money, because obviously we'd like it to be used.
Well, can we just take them one at a time?
Yes,
so
you
we can
can.
make comments
Okay,
on,
okay.
on this particular one. I think, and you are correct, I don't think they know about it, but one of the big things, and you've got the institutional memory as well, is the reason that a lot of people who would probably use this are not is because of the 3 bids. And we've gone over and over and over on this and made some recommendations where you didn't need the 3 bids. I think maybe what we have to look at, because this is not agendized tonight, but in the future, is to look at that. And why do we need the 3 bids if we're going to go up to 25,000? And like, for example, yourself, if you do something, or yourself, if you do something, I mean, why do you need 3 bids when you cannot get, there's no way to get 3 bids on anything anymore? So that has, I know personally, I have had people come in and say, I can't do it. There's no way I can get the 3 bids, so therefore I'm going to do it myself, which is a good thing, but that's not what the purpose of this was.
Right, and just, this has come up before, and at the board retreat in February, the board verified that they don't expect 3 bids, and they recognize that people cannot get 3 bids. And as I recall, it was their recollection that they had taken an action to waive the requirement for 3 bids, so I can research that.
Well, and we in the past have also done that. If someone came to us multiple times and said, I just can't get the 3 bids, we've waived that and gone ahead and granted it. So it's not in stone.
It is not in stone, but the other thing is too, if it could be left out, or if we looked at the regulations or the requirements and have that, taken out, is if, say the word if possible. We'd like more than one bid, but
Yeah, agreed. I wouldn't take it out completely, but I would leave it in there. If possible, please provide 3 bids.
yeah, because I think when people are looking at what the requirements are and they see this 3 bids right away, that's a turnoff because they're not going to work with government.
Okay, the next one is the downtown equipment and infrastructure that was budgeted at $25,000. None of that money was spent. This line item is for benches and bike racks. If a bench or a bike rack has to be replaced, the expenditure could be charged to this item. In fiscal year '23, the budget includes $25,000 for this item. So I think it's just an issue of if something breaks, the money's there, but if nothing breaks, you just don't use the money.
Comment on this one? Of course, I have a comment. There's something big coming up on April 21st of next year, which is the Mark Twain Days. And since there is money allocated for benches, it would be great to get at least 1 or 2 Mark Twain benches downtown. That would be great for photo ops, and it would really enhance. I've seen this in a number of cities around the United States, and there's always people around those benches. You can get them, you have to get them through China. It takes up to 30 days. So we need to, if we decide that this is something we want to do, that definitely should be, on the roll now maybe. But I'd love to see some, not to say that we don't have great benches. We have lots of benches, but not the kind that people would just go sit on. So if Deborah wants to weigh in on that, I think, would that be appropriate?
Hi, Deborah Soul here. Thank you, Ronnie. I actually appreciate you bringing up a suggestion for the Mark Twain Days Festival because there are a number of projects in the works to try and prepare the downtown area for this festival, including a new mural that's in the works. But I do agree that having a bench or a series of benches would be a lovely addition, and certainly would encourage people to have photographs and share their images while they're visiting Carson City for the festival. It would be a good project.
Do we need to take any action on this to bring it before the Board of Supervisors or what,
No.
to get this going?
No, this agenda item is for me to let you know what money was not spent in fiscal year '22. But I think the dialogue you're having is good because it's something I can bring back to you in agenda so you can discuss it specifically and make a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority.
Okay, the only thing that I have to say on this, it would be sooner rather than later because of the fact sooner is coming very fast. So faster than we know.
The other suggestion I might make is that if you can find local craftspeople to create these benches, that actually would be preferable.
Most definitely. The benches are roughly about 5,000 to 6,000. They're usually in bronze, and that is quite expensive to do. And since they have all the, how should I say, everything has already been pre-done in China, and that's where a lot of the people have gotten this. But if somebody can do this for $5,000 or $6,000, that would be great. But anyway, I think bottom line is instead of talking a lot about it, is we have to do something.
I have a quick question or 2 comments. I absolutely support local artists if in fact we can make that happen. And just a question, so the The explanation on this is if a bench or bike rack must be replaced, it could be used with this money. Is it also, though, automatically available to purchase something new, and not as a replacement?
I don't believe there's anything that would make it exclusive.
Okay, great.
I think there was no plan for more benches or bike racks, so that's why we said repair.
Okay. Yeah, you have my thinking cap going, maybe every specific festival or something, there could be kind of a bench made for that particular event. That could be kind of a fun timeline.
I like the way you think. So, yeah, that would be sort of a fun thing to do, and I think they're funner benches, than just the regular two-seater benches. So I think it's something to pursue, and we'd appreciate you taking it to whomever that you need to take it to, so.
Our next item would be the utility extension sidewalk assistance. That was budgeted at $20,000 and has a year-end budget or balance of $20,000, so that money was not spent. I believe these funds were not spent due to a lack of knowledge that they existed. These monies are utilized when someone who's doing a private project has a requirement to extend utilities or make sidewalk improvements, say an ADA curb at a corner or something like that, then they can avail themselves of these funds. I have spoken with Stephen Pote, who's the head of our development engineering, to make sure he understood these funds were available should he be working with a property owner who could potentially use them in the redevelopment area. The fiscal year 23 budget does include $20,000 for this line item.
Is this matching funds or is it grants?
I believe it's a grant, but they're already making an improvement on the property, so. If there's nothing on this one, I can go on to the downtown entry sign. This is what Deborah came out for. The budgeted amount was $25,000. The end year balance was $25,000, so this money was not utilized. This is for the entryway feature that will be installed in the circle at South Carson Street and Stewart Street. I will just let Deborah speak to that, if that's okay.
The south entrance signage is actually a public art project, the roundabout project, and it's a major public art project. And that is why funds were put aside from that, as well as funds being put aside from the CTA budget for that. Because it is a major project, the advice that was provided and there was strong consensus around was that we needed to have the public art policy completed and in place before we proceeded with that major project. And at this time, the public art policy has been prepared. It has gone through input from all city departments, and in its draft form went to the Cultural Commission a couple of weeks ago, and their recommendation is that it be put forward for the Board of Supervisors consideration and to be adopted. So once that policy is in place, then we will be following the guidelines in that policy and all of the procedures that are also spelled out in it for this major project.
So once approved, do you sort of have a timeline on this?
The timeline that's recommended, if we follow the RFP, RFQ process, whichever the Cultural Commission decides to go with, would be an extended process. It would take several months to put out the call, to narrow it down to finalists, and then go ahead and try and decide on the final artist and submission. There is also a possibility of acquiring pieces for that location from the current year's Burning Man sculpture lineup I've had conversations with the curator for the Burning Man project for this year, and she's encouraging us to have a close look at all of the pieces that are there, that there may be something that would be appropriate for the roundabout that we could acquire after the Burning Man Festival concludes this year. So that is something that I'm also looking at, and I will be bringing some recommendations forward from that.
Well, the Burning Man usually has really odd stuff, so I'm not sure, that's interesting. Plus, it's very expensive, so probably more so. I mean, truly, it is odd, so I'm not sure that it matches what.
If
the
I
original
might,
thoughts.
there was one particular series that we were interested in that was, we were notified about that there's a collection of horses being sculpted in this year's festival, and that we might be interested in some of those pieces for the roundabout. So there are some that are not too unusual. And, well, depending on what other pieces are there this year, there are 400 sculptures or 400 art pieces entered in this year's festival. So there may be some potential there.
I'll have a good time finding it. Any comments on this? Anybody going so they can see this? You got your tickets? You're busy that weekend? Oh, gosh, I was going to go with you. Darn. Yeah. Well, no, no comment on, what's going on there or what's not going on there, but it's just any of the sculptures I've seen have been really odd, so. But anyway, I'm sure you will find something just perfect at a good price, so. As I see here, you only have $75,000 to play with.
Okay, if there's nothing else on that, I'll go on to the park signs. For park signs, the budget amount in FY '22 was a little more than 46,000. We have a balance of about 19,000. The Parks and Rec Department anticipates needing these funds for signs at Fuji Park and Mills Park. The department has prioritized the master plan for both of these parks before pursuing the signs. And the signage at Fuji Park is anticipated to be $10,000, and signage at Mills Park is anticipated to be a little more than $6,000. No funds have been allocated for park signs in fiscal year '23. So although there's a balance, they have a plan for that money, and we'll be spending it. The Bob Boldrick Theater, and just jump in if you want me to stop. I'll just go. The budget was a little more than 27,000. That has not been spent. Parks and Rec anticipates using these funds for lighting. The Parks and Rec director is currently working on a grant from the Hawkins Foundation for additional funds. And in fiscal year '23, $170,000 has been allocated to the theater to improve upper and lower ADA seating in the theater and to add an open assist to the lobby doors. So they have a little bit of money that they'd like to use for the lighting.
Why is this taking so long? Because we've discussed this quite a bit of, a number of times, lighting and whatever they needed, yeah. So it seems like it just rolls over every year.
That's why I'm bringing it to your attention, so you can look at that.
Stop it, spend it.
Since this, right, and this one was 27,000, we are looking at the 170,000 for FY '23. So I think when you have the request for the expenditure of the 170,000, we can say, how about that lighting for 27,000? Is that good to go yet? The Fuji Park improvements, the budgeted amount is 200,000. The end of year balance was more than 190,000. The department has advised that they're waiting for the adoption of the Fuji Park Master Plan before pursuing the improvements. The master plan was adopted in June, and the fiscal year '23 budget does not allocate funds to this project. The Engine House Arch, and I'll ask Randy Rice, our city engineer, to join me on this one. The Engine House Arch had a budget of $265,000, end of year budget in excess of $250,000. It's anticipated that the structural engineer will work on the construction design in September, and the delay on this project has been due to a lack of availability of design professionals. I know everyone's really interested in the arch, so I'll turn it over to Randy to expand on what's up with the arch.
Thanks, Hope. Randy Rice, city engineer for the record. As Hope had mentioned, this project has been a lot more difficult, especially with the procurement and lead times that we've been seeing this year. Kind of blindsided us on a lot of different sides. The sandstone that we had discussed early on that we were kind of searching for out in the landfill, a lot of that sandstone was in poor shape. We actually have engaged with a professional mason out in, I believe he's over in Mound House. And he's very familiar with the construction of items using sandstone, which is a very unique soft rock. It's not like a granite where it holds up to a lot of force. It's easily weathered. And so we're actually learning a lot about this process and the difficulty in working with sandstone. And there are actually specific grout mixes that work better to bind sandstone rather than a typical mortar mix or a cement mix. So during this learning phase and pulling all these pieces together, the other side of things is we've had a hard time finding consultants that are available to do work in this small fashion, right? Even though the project is still sizable for Carson City, the amount of work that goes into it is not. And so just like contractors, our consultants and our professionals are also very busy. And so we kind of keep prodding them to put this at the top of the list. I think the good news is we were thinking September is when the consultants could get around to the design. It sounds like they're going to start in August now. So they're actually going to be able to move it forward sooner than we were believing. So that is good news. The other thing I can report on is we are probably around the 60 to 90% on the site civil improvements. So that means the pad grading, kind of the irrigation layout, the crosswalk that we were designing to cross the parking lot here just to our east, and the connectivity, the sidewalk and the accessible ramp that connects this parking lot to the actual art piece itself. That's getting close to nearly ready to go. So one thing we've talked about is the potential to phase the project. So in other words, we could build the site improvements sooner than later, and then have a sign or something erected that essentially says coming soon, engine house arch, and maybe have some of the sketches. As you can probably imagine, the risk there is, as I mentioned, I think in our past meeting, prices are still rising. We're looking at utilizing steel as one of the structural members that kind of keep, encase and cage in some of the rocks to make that a structurally safe and sound art piece. And so with that being said, if the prices go up and we come back to this commission to recommend additional funding and you decide to reject that offer, then we could be stuck with potentially a phase one project that never gets built, which could be potential black eye for everyone involved. So a couple different things that you might want to discuss amongst yourself there. Do we want to move forward with the sidewalk? Do we want to move forward with the site improvements and have a future home of, or do we want to just come back once we have the final product all together? Again, it is kind of a roll of a dice, just like anything else. When we send out projects to bid, we're kind of putting our best guess on what we think those things will cost, but we don't really know. Sometimes we have a hard time guessing how much risk is kind of baked into those contracts, right? We do a really good job on our underground, on our streets, because we've been doing it for so long. But these one-off projects, sometimes there's hidden risks that a contractor perceives that maybe we haven't addressed properly, or we have to have some back and forth there. So anyways, just wanted you to be aware of how that process works and be transparent on where we are with that. But if you have any questions, happy to go through those.
Anybody have any questions?
Not a question, but I like the third option, really to see what we're looking at and total cost and go forward that way. I think it's the most appropriate way to move on this.
Well, one thing about the economy is we've gone through this. Those of us who are over 50 maybe have gone through this a couple of times. And yes, prices seem to go up, but they also go down. So, you are shooting the dice, as you said, and it may go down. I know that originally we had wanted this to be completed by the 4th of July. And it would have been nice to have had it with the Great American or the Great Western Steam Up, but it was not in the cards, I guess. So I think it's an important art project. There's a lot of art stuff going on, but this is part of Carson City's history as well. So I think this should remain a priority. I don't know about how you all feel, but people still today who were around at the time lament over the fact of those arches. And yes, sandstone is soft, but hopefully this will be a wow project. And it is something, so do you have any kind of timeline at all?
Yeah, so typically, now that we're getting the structural engineer on board, that process should go pretty quick. 2 to 4 weeks to iron that out. The difficulty that we're having right now is how exactly we make this structurally sound. The side-by-side arch, if you can imagine just stacking a piece of paper up, right? Just a little force, it would want to fall over. And so getting the foundation right and getting the encasement right, are we going to cage this thing? We're also looking at another option of using like CMU block walls, what you'd see a typical building made out of brick, right? And then making it a facade. So actually cutting the sandstone and placing it around it so that part's not as structurally stringent, right, as the requirements go. So, but back to your point, probably 2 to 4 weeks for the structural, probably another month after that to finish the site civil and to get the electrical, the irrigation, all that settled. And then after that, we can probably go out to bid. So I would think, probably bid in the fall time and then maybe construct early next year, weather dependent.
Anybody have any questions? I have a comment. If the project might be structurally unsound, can we relook at it and maybe not have the double arches? We liked the way the double arches looked at the time, but did not know that it could be a potential hazard, and we do not want those structures to fall on anybody. So, how do you feel about opening up that can of worms?
Why don't we table that until we know more? I don't think that it's going to be structurally unsound. It just might take more engineering to get it done, if that makes sense. One thing we've toyed with kind of behind the doors is what happens if we were to, if you can imagine the two arches side by side, maybe put a hinge point, a bend in the middle, which would actually help make the structure more rigid, right? So it would still give the illusion of a side-by-side, but it would just have a skew to it, right? So if you're looking head-on, it would look mostly like side-by-side, but hinging it in the middle of those two arches might have some lateral support for the structure as well. So let us dig into that a little bit more, and if we think that the change is principal enough to come back to this board, we can certainly do that at that time and maybe open that back up again if that's okay with this commission.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think you touched on something that a lot of times is an easy fix, is that you make it structurally sound and then you adapt to it afterwards and put a facade on that makes it sandstone, which is like a lot of homes are built and other buildings across the country. So it doesn't necessarily have to be accurate to the nth degree of being built with sandstone from the ground up. So
Yep,
I think
absolutely.
you got some options that way before we look at alternates.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments on this at all?
Right, so when it comes time for, once they have their construction drawings done and they're able to figure out what the cost will be for execution, it will come back here because if you'll have a chance to look at that, and it may require value engineering, it may be a good number. We'll see where we are, right, in the cycle. Third Street parking lot. The budgeted amount on the Third Street parking lot was in excess of $400,000. End of year balance was $71,000. So I thought there was leftover money, but there's not. Public Works is waiting on a 200 amp panel that's delayed due to supply chain issues. Once the department takes delivery of this piece of equipment, it will be able to complete the project, and it does anticipate using all of the funding. Sidewalk and ADA improvements, and you'll remember from the February meeting, for the next 5 years, we're looking at allocating $200,000 to that line item for the purpose of leveraging federal money. In fiscal year 2022, The funding was not a site-specific expenditure, much like the future funding's not a site-specific expenditure. It was to be able to identify funding to leverage other funding. So the Public Works Department has completed an analysis and planning phase and is working on a design utilizing in-house staff. And I'll let the city engineer speak more specifically to that.
Thanks, Hope. Randy Rice, City Engineer for the record. So essentially, we have 2 to 3 areas that we're working on. So the first 200,000, I guess what we used that for was fiscal year 22. We asked for an additional 130,000, and that went towards the section of California Street, which was a part of the Colorado Street CIP project for Public Works. Unfortunately, the prices on that project came back astronomical, and we decided to take another look at that project, and we're currently anticipating on rebidding that project in the middle to late fall. Hopefully that contractors get a little hungrier. Some of their next year construction's a little bit more in question. We get better rates, right? It's kind of the game we play. The second set of money, and I believe what you have in the packet here is a little bit incorrect. There should be a line item for 200,000, which is the annual sidewalk improvements, one being 200,000 for fiscal year 23, and there should only 22. Got it. And there should be another 305,000, which is for the Stewart and Musser corner. If you'll recall from that meeting, it was 105,000. That was to help with the design and construction of the corner where Mangiatuto is right there. That one has really bad, sidewalks, a lot of old driveway aprons that are no longer being used. And it's really not a good walking path, let alone an ADA accessible path. So that was 105,000 that we set aside for that. And then we also had another 200,000 that we added on top of that we were going to look at, bus stops, improvements, sidewalk connectivity, ramps that needed improvements and things like that. So between that meeting and today, we've done a ton of field reconnaissance, looking at, what's out there, what would be low-hanging fruit for us, right? Obviously, moving telephone poles and building retaining walls is very expensive. So what makes sense on our budget, and then also what makes sense for the area for underserved, connectivity to bank, infrastructure, grocery stores, things like that. So the areas that we came up with that we're currently working on is we have almost a full design for the west side of Anderson Street between Washington and Caroline. So there's a strip of grass there that basically has nothing there, and we cannot. There actually is partial connectivity on the east side of the street, but unfortunately there's some very old mature trees there that we cannot work around without being on private property. So we decided to get the connectivity on the east side there. So that'll include sidewalk connectivity and a pedestrian ramp on that portion. And then if we have enough funds left over, we have what's called a bid alternate, which is, hey, we have some extra money. We also want to build this with this project. And that's on the northwest corner of Valley and Caroline Street. So we're looking at putting in some ramps there, and part of that reason is we have a number of residents that's kind of an extended stay property, and a lot of them go to the grocery store, will have their shopping cart, and they have a difficult time staying out of the street because they just can't get on and off the sidewalk through there. Obviously, that's not enough to make the full connectivity. We're still missing connectivity down Caroline. None of the other ramps in that corridor have ADA ramps, but that's why we are asking to continue this program year by year, right? Because we want to continue to fund it and start looking for opportunities to create these corridors and these pathways to get through the neighborhood. So that's one. And then I'll just touch really quickly on fiscal year 23 because we've already done some of the legwork. That's why fiscal year 22 took a little bit of extra time because this is a new program. And so it took us time to get out there and reconnoiter the area, to get staff time out there, do the design. We also had to survey, so we sent staff out there with survey equipment to get design grades and elevations for us so that we can actually come back to the office and figure that out. So with that, we've also been looking at the East Robinson Street area, essentially from Anderson to Walsh. And there's a bus stop here that we're looking at improving. It is on a heavily transited area in Carson City along Robinson Street. The good news is that actually allows us to go after, obtain FTA grant money. So that's an 80-20 match. So we'll essentially use the money to pay for the improvements, and we'll get almost all of that back. So that means if you grant us the $200,000 next year, and that goes forward in fiscal year 24, any money that rolls forward, we can either use that on continuing connectivity in that area or roll it forward to have a bigger project and go after bigger grant money the following year. So that's kind of the 2-minute summary of that.
Do you want to, just while you have the mic, talk about the Colorado Street paving project and restoring Telegraph Street improvements?
So, Mr. Rice, do we need to have a motion on that to continue or to go to the, we were only recommending anyway. This body can only recommend to the full Board of Supervisors, so we don't need any action.
This item is only to review what the budget balances are at the end of fiscal year '22. So it's not really an action item. It's letting you know what money was not spent. So I think what the city engineer has done is kind of explain there were different packages of money, if you will, for street improvements and kind of given you an overview. But the money, I think, is a little bit fluid between fiscal year '22 and '23 and potentially '24, in that different activities on the same projects are happening. Plus, the fact that the money is used to leverage other money then starts defining how the money gets used based on what federal money is available. So it's not an action item, it's
Yeah,
just
this
giving you
is not
status.
new anyway, because we had discussed it in our 2.5-hour meeting last time, so in February, so, and gave you guys lots of money at that particular time to make our city look wonderful.
Yeah, and just to complete Hope's thought, well, now I forgot where I was going with that, but I think that the difference between the last meeting and this meeting is we kind of had a vague sense of the area, but now we have defined areas. So I kind of just wanted to give you an update on where those exact areas were.
And that concludes what I wanted to explain to you in terms of where we were at the end of fiscal year '22, which was June 30th, 2022, in terms of that fiscal year budget.
Well, you did a good job, thank you. Anybody have any comments on this at all? No? Okay, Mr. Rice, thank you. I can't wait to see the arches. Okay, so moving on to 4D. This is discussion and possible action regarding a proposed recommendation to the RDA on the allocation of additional funding to first-time special events that occur in the redevelopment area. Now, I feel like we've already sort of discussed this, but Hope, take us through this.
Okay, so Section 320 of the Redevelopment Plan for Carson City, Project 1, dated February 6, 1986, states that one of the redevelopment objectives is to establish the highest level of recreational opportunity for the residents and visitors of all ages. Consistent with this objective, the fiscal year '23 redevelopment budget includes $25,000 for Nevada Day, $25,000 for the farmers market, $10,000 for the Christmas tree lighting, $50,000 for art and cultural events, and $15,000 for the 4th of July fireworks. This agenda item is intended to allow the committee to decide or to discuss the funding of recreational events, specifically whether there should be a recommendation to the redevelopment authority to provide funding as, quote, seed money to encourage more events in the redevelopment area. So this is just an opportunity for you to have that conversation.
This is Vice Chair Cardinal. I think this kind of takes us back a few years from when we were doing that on an ongoing basis. And I don't personally have anything against or any objections of looking forward if someone wants to come down with a new event and potentially providing some seed money to get them going that gets stepped down quickly, or maybe it's only 1 year of the seed money to get an event going. Because I am all about having more events in the city for everybody to participate in. So what that level is, how much, I think that's all up to discussion. I think that should be looked at on a case-by-case basis on how much that event potentially is going to cost and how many people it's going to bring to our area and things like that. So my position is I'm for something like this, but I'm definitely for it to be something that is a quick step down process, maybe a one-time only, two-time only, three-time only at the max, so.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. The only thing is we sort of allocated this responsibility to the Arts and Cultural Commission way back when, a couple of years ago. And I was surprised sort of to see this because of that fact. I mean, the redevelopment authority already gave 50,000. If they need to give more, I do remember when we had them lined up here. Remember that? You know, for dancing and all kinds of other stuff. And we all looked at each other and said, oh, please, we don't know anything about your little ballets or whatever. Send it over to Arts and Culture Commission. And I'm thinking maybe that is a better thing to give to the Arts and Culture Commission. What's your take on this?
Well, let me ask you on that. If we did that in the past, and I don't remember when we turned that over because a lot of stuff's happened, why is the Arts and Culture Commission not running with this? Where's the disconnect between arts and culture getting it from us and not seeing this coming forward?
I don't think there is a disconnect. Actually, when the chair and I met to talk about the agenda, one of the things we talked about was, and I may have misunderstood it, but I thought we were talking about seed money for first-time events. Okay.
Well, I think wouldn't most of these events, even
Yeah.
the ones that I throw, the big events, they're art, there's music, and it's arts, it's culture, there's all kinds of stuff. So I think Ronnie's right. When any one of these type of events, in my mind, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head that wouldn't fall under an arts and culture type thing, whether it's an axe throwing competition or your ballet stuff or whatever it is. That's all arts and culture, whether it's music or things like that. So I think within them, that's great. I guess I would ask one question: is the $50,000 that we give to the arts and culture, is that all they have to go towards this, or do they have their own pool of money in addition to that they would be able to utilize as seed money for
You
people?
know, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think they are able to get grant monies, and then you do have the 1% room tax that goes to arts and culture. I know, and then that extra 25,000 that we have just given, or the redevelopment authority, not this committee, has given, is mostly for salaries. So I don't know how much money there is after salaries. When you take that out, is how much seed money there is. But I see, if I can just sort of make my 2 cents here, I see us more as bricks and mortar, more so. And that is why you have an Arts and Culture Committee to determine what is best for the city. And it is my understanding that they're doing some internal changes as well. So the other question that I have is, when you are saying establish the highest possible level of recreational opportunity for the residents, I don't quite see where, and I know we've talked about this ad nauseum, but I don't see where the farmer's market becomes a recreational opportunity unless looking at fruits and vegetables or whatever is recreational. I don't know.
I know of several people who the farmer's market, they ride their bike down to the farmer's market. They walk over to the farmer's market. It is a destination in and of itself. And I see the farmer's market, honestly, I would like redevelopment money to continue helping them, and perhaps not at the $25,000 level. And I know that is not on the agenda, but I hope for that particular event, it is such an integral part now of Carson City and of summertime, and it is really just such a benefit to the community and to the residents. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. It also additionally does celebrate art with some of the booths, and even the idea of healthy eating, and access to locally sourced vegetables, fruits, and that whole health component behind that, I think, is a huge positive. So while it's not something you typically think recreational per se, I think the ripple effect of what it offers is a recreational opportunity.
This is Vice Chair Cardinal. I agree. I love the farmer's market, and I don't think there's any discussion about getting rid of the farmer's market because that's something that's been here. So I think that the question here is regarded to seed money to encourage more events. So not events that are already taking place because it's already listed on here. So I don't think that that was ever the intention of getting rid of the farmer's market.
Awesome. And no, and I know it was never about getting rid of. I just know talking about starting to reduce some of the funding, and that has been discussed. So I just. I don't want to pay more than $90 for my tomato. There you go.
Right.
See?
Well, I think that was because this is the only line item here that is profit. It is a profit-making company, where the others are not. They are just.
It's run by a company that's making money. It's not a nonprofit.
It's not a nonprofit. And I think that is the only reason I'm even bringing this up, because everything else is nonprofit, and like the arts and cultural, on the 50,000.
But they also work directly with nonprofits. They have their voucher programs and.
Well, I don't think, as you said, Mr. Cardinal, I don't think we need to get into it. It's seed money, but the bottom line, I think, is it really should go over to the Arts and Culture Commission.
I guess I have a quick question. So the 50,000 budgeted for the arts and culture is not part of the seed money. The seed money is in addition to.
This line item was just to, exactly, this line item was to have that conversation. So it sounds like the consensus is we'll leave arts and culture events to Arts and Culture Commission. They have the 50,000, and you'll take it year by year, whether or not that needs to be adjusted.
Yeah, and if they want to provide seed money for somebody to come up, then it's the arts and culture's position to get that seed money, not ours, or not from us.
Actually, when you think about it, it all goes back down to the Redevelopment Authority. I mean, all we can do is recommend. The only thing that we really can do, and nobody seems to want our money, is the facade improvement program. So it's the only real thing that we have. So Supervisor Schutte, I guess it's all up to you. So since you're the one. Pardon me? Oh, yes, you're in the redevelopment zone. Give us, come on. You can get up to 25,000, so sure. Covered doorway. All right, so where are we? So, number 5, discussion only. Staff reports and updates on matters relating to the RACC. Hope?
No, this whole meeting's already been an update. So I've given you the updates.
So this was very nice. That was very fast. Thank you. So are there any RACC member reports and comments? No, but I'll tell you one thing. The only comment I have is because we were part of it because of where the chamber is located, is one of the best events that I have seen in Carson City in a long time, that brought so many people here that did not come to us for any monies, okay, and was put on by a governmental entity, was the Great Western Steam Up. They came from all over, from Europe, from Australia. People flew in from San Diego just to be here for the day. They came from everywhere. I could not believe it. So that shows that if you want to do something special and you know how to do it right, it can really happen. I've never seen so many people here for an event like this. So congratulations to the Nevada State Tourism and the Railroad Museum for putting that on. It was really spectacular.
I do have one update, since it's been so long since we had a meeting. Just an update on this last year's Rib Fest, which we had to put on hiatus for 2 years due to COVID. it came back with a vengeance. We had by far the largest crowds we've ever had, over 25,000 people showing up for Rib Fest this year. We've got our Oktoberfest coming up the first Saturday in October, and we also participated with the Steam Up too. We provided a lot of meals to the volunteers and catered
Water.
a big dinner and provided the water. So we had a lot of fun helping participate in that event too. So I think we got a lot of fun things happening around here. The only other thing I have is, we were the last new casino to open up in Northern Nevada 19 years ago. And in less than a month, we will be the next newest casino to open up in Northern Nevada in Sparks. So we're T-minus a month and that thing will be open. So it's almost done.
And then we have your full attention, right?
Yes.
I see there's so many people here chomping at the bit. This is a public comment time, and everyone here, take your turn. You're invited to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. You have a public comment?
Well, yes, I will. And sorry, it just, I went to the NACO conference last weekend, and I actually, one of the sessions was about arts and culture in communities. And one of the panelists, she is an accountant, but got through school singing opera. And she started her presentation, she gets up there and she talks a little bit about numbers, and then she just starts singing, and it was just incredible. I mean, everyone was, oh my gosh, and we didn't want her to stop. But just talking about the opportunities that culture brought to her, and the lead into different ways for a community to bring in funding, to bring in tourism, to bring in quality of life and just enjoyment in your own backyard was amazing. And so afterwards, I talked to her about, just how creative people have had to be in the last few years, and the flatbed truck series that Brewery Arts was doing. And just, the music is such, it just brings people together. And granted, it is one art form, and there are so many, but it was so inspirational. And I'll revisit the recording and all, and I'll share more. But yeah, arts and culture, community is so much more than sidewalks and roads and buildings. It's about the feeling that goes with all of those things, why we want to drive somewhere or ride our bikes, or why we want to celebrate together. And so it was delightful.
And then I'll say just one more thing is, because you sort of brought it out, Brewery Arts Center again is, I think, the premium arts, especially since Gina took over. And the other is now that Nashville Social Club is open. I mean, I know it's privately funded, et cetera, but that will give us an awful lot of, I like their culture, actually. I like fried chicken, so, this is fine for me, the Southern culture. So, but there's a lot going on in Carson City as far as music venues or any other kind of venues. So I think it's a good thing, and I echo you. So do you have anything to say for how's the Bank Saloon doing?
We do a lot of music too, so. We're
And
4 nights a week, so.
And I understand you've got dog night where you can bring your dogs.
That's
and
Tuesdays, yeah.
Tuesdays is dog night. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but
Now you do.
I know the amazing Manhattans.
Okay, so any other comments for the good of comments? No? All right, then without further ado, it is now not quite 6:45, so we're early tonight. So I will take a motion for adjournment.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moved. So thank you guys. Hopefully, hope that we will not spend another, 6 months or so before we have another meeting, so that we hope we have a decent agenda. So, thank you. We're here.